Hey guys, Jared here, and welcome to Pong Part 4. Are you kidding me? Do you know how long it's been since Part 3? I mean, it's only been about 2 weeks. Right? 2 months! And you expect people to stay around and watch for Part 4? Yeah, I know. Hey look, just don't let it happen again, okay? Okay, won't ever happen again. Either way, what we're going to be doing in Pong Part 4 is essentially just working with screen sizes and making sure that everything is properly set up. So this should be the final installment of Pong. We're going to go ahead and worry about screen sizes as well as different levels that people can pick. So play against harder bots as well as play against 2 people. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is jump into our Pong project, go in here to our GameViewController.swift, and then we need to go ahead and fix up some of the screen sizes in here. So the first thing we need to do is say my scene.size will be equal to that of my view, which we create right up here, if let view equal an skView, which is actually going to be our game scene view. So we say our scene.size will be equal to our view.bounds.size, like so. So we're just grabbing the boundaries of our scene project and applying that to our scene art itself. So let's go ahead and build and run this, and let's see where we're at inside of our iPhone 7 and see if that works properly. Alright, so what we did to the game was we made it fit to the screen size, and this is pretty necessary. But as you can see, it completely messed up the whole game and where our paddles are placed and everything like that. So what we need to do is go ahead and fix that so that we have everything positioned properly. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and go into my gamescene.sks, and we're going to mess it with these labels, make sure that they're the right size and whatnot. So with the labels right here, you might want them that big, but I'm going to shrink them down a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and fix that. So with these labels, I'm going to go ahead and take the Y position and move that down to, let's say, 100. And then we're going to change the Y position for this one to -100 as well. Then as for the font size, we're going to go ahead and change this down to, I think, 20. We want this pretty big, so around 48 I think is good. So we're going to put it at 48, and then we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with this other one. Then we also want to change the size for our ball. I'm going to go ahead and change this over to a 15 by 15 ball. And I think that's a pretty good size for the screen size we're working at, but we'll judge when we get there. Then, of course, our paddles. Our paddles are an interesting thing. So we also want to work with the size right here. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down to 150 by height of, let's say, 15. I think that would look good. And then we're going to change the paddle size for this one as well to 150, and then our height will be equal to 15 as well. Now, as for the position on the screen, we're going to change this all programmatically. So the way that we do that is go over here to our gamescene.swift, and the first thing that we want to do is access our enemy and our main. So with our enemy right here, I'm going to go ahead and say my enemy.position.y will be equal to, I'm going to set this equal to myself.frame.height divided by 2, and then we're going to go ahead and put this all in parentheses like so. And then we're going to go ahead, and what we're doing here is, as you can imagine, this is going to be using my fingers. That doesn't help. But our self.frame.height divided by 2 will be taking the height of our frame, which is now this size right here. So it's just going to take half of that frame size, and we're going to do the exact same thing for this other one. Again, 0 is the center of that screen, so we need to work with that. So we're saying self.frame.height, divide that by 2. Now we're working in this area. Then we want to go ahead and minus, let's say, I think 50 would be good. And then we'll see where that takes us. And then now with our main here, we're going to go ahead and say my main.position.y will be equal to, and we're going to do the exact opposite of everything that we did previously with the enemy. So I'm going to say this is equal to my negative self.frame.height, and then divide that by 2. And then we're going to go ahead and add 50 to that in that case. So again, we're just getting half and then adding 50 back so that it's just right back on the screen. Now let's go ahead and build and run this, and let's see where we're at. All right, so here we are back with Pong. I think the positioning is very nice, but I think our paddles are a little bit too large, as well as the ball is going really fast right now, and that's because we reduced the mass of it, so it's applying more of a force to something smaller, so of course it's going to go a little bit faster. So the way that I'm going to fix that is we're going to go back over here to our gamescene.sks, and let's first fix the paddle size. So I'm going to go ahead and take the width here and change this to, I think 100 will be good. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with this one. We're going to give it the width of 100. And I think that should be good. Now let's go ahead and fix that ball. So we go in here to our GameScene.Swift. And then with our ball, as you can see, we have ball.physicsBody.apply impulse, and we're applying 20, 20. That's a really strong impulse to something that small. So we're just going to go ahead and reduce that by, let's say, half, and say that's 10 and then 10. We'll see how that works. So let's go ahead and build and run this and see where we're at. Now, as you can see, it goes a little bit slower. I think I like that a lot more. My simulator is running really slow today for some reason, but as you can see, it works. Now, the problem that I'm facing is if I let the ball go behind me, there's not enough of that gap to make it count as a point. So let's fix that inside of our code as well. Now down here inside of our update, this is where we're working with the positioning of the ball. Whether it's when it goes underneath that paddle, we want it to count as a point when it hits a certain place. So right here is where we're working with that. So what I'm gonna do is say if my ball.position.y is less than the main.position.y minus, and then we're gonna go ahead and set that equal to 30 or 40, one of those numbers. I'm feeling 30 might be better, just so that we make sure that it gets nailed every time, but I think that's pretty good. So now let's go ahead and build and run this, and we should be good to go. Now sometimes, and this is I think because of my simulator, that if it goes underneath here, sometimes it works, but also other times it doesn't work so great. I think that's just because the simulator is just running so slow, but that should be perfectly fine throughout the rest of the game. You can of course lower that number if you want, and it should work perfectly fine as well. Now the other problem that I was facing is this ball just keeps going fast when I die, and that's for the specific reason that we have add score. And then inside of add score, we apply a certain impulse to that ball. So we need to go down here inside of our add score here, and we're just going to apply the impulse of 10 to that, and then the impulse of negative 10 down here to that. So just change anywhere that you apply an impulse to 10, negative 10, so on and so forth. Now let's go ahead and build and run this. And then when we do die, it shouldn't go that fast anymore. And here we are with our ball again. So we have everything programmed properly for the iPhone 7, and we're pretty much back to where we started. But the thing that I changed mainly was the scene.size will be equal to my view.bounds.size. And this is very important for our iPads. So let's go ahead and build and run this on the iPad. And here we have it on our iPad. So as you can see, the screen size and everything has conformed properly, and our paddles are spaced out between the bottom properly as well. The only problem is, of course, it's a larger device, so things scale a little differently. If you want to scale and work with things directly, what you can do is go back over here to your GameScene.Swift and test variables accordingly. So with your enemy.position.y here, or with your speed here, you would go ahead and say, if my screen size is this certain size, then you're going to go ahead and resize things accordingly. But for our purposes, I think what we've done is very nice, and it accomplishes the task that needed to be done. All right, so now on to the next part, where we're going to go ahead and determine different levels. So you can do 2-player, or you can play against a harder bot. First, we're going to tackle the harder bot, because that's the simplest. The first thing that we need is a selection screen. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go in here to my main.storyboard, and we're going to go ahead and add another view controller. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more view controller onto the scene like that. And then we're going to click and drag that arrow over to that, so that it is the initial view controller. Now this game view controller is our game, so we can pretty much just go right over here to our view controller right here and add a few buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and add 4 buttons total. So we have 3 difficulties as well as 2-player. Now we want to go ahead and create a new Swift file that will directly impact this view controller. So I'm going to say File, New, File, and this is of course going to be a Swift file. Go ahead, click Next, and we're going to create this file as my menu VC. Now go ahead and create that. And now we have our menu VC right here. Then inside of here, we want to go ahead and add a class. This is of course going to be a view controller class, so that we can directly impact that view controller that we just created. So with our class right here, I'm going to go ahead and call this my menu VC. Then with our superclass, I'm going to give this the superclass of a UI view controller. And then also, because we are working with UIKit, we want to go ahead and import UIKit. Now down here inside of my menu VC, this is where we're going to be working with some of the buttons. So let's go back over here to our main.storyboard, and the first thing that I want to do is connect that menu.vc.swift file that we just created to this view controller. So I'm going to go over here to my identity inspector, and for the class, I'm just going to go ahead and switch that to menu.vc, and we're good. So now let's click on this menu VC right here, go over here to our assistant view controller, and now we're all hooked up properly, so it should automatically go to that file that we have. Now let's go ahead and work with these buttons. So with our first button right here, we have 2-player. I'm going to go ahead and insert an action to that 2-player, and for the name here, we're just going to go ahead and switch this to player 2. I think that's a good name. Now let's go ahead and connect that, and we're good. Now for the rest of these, go ahead and connect them as actions, and this will be easy, medium, and hard. Every time. At least one. At least one has to be that way, huh? And there we have it. So now with easy, medium, and hard, we're going to be changing variables accordingly. So with these functions, when we click on them, we want to move them over to our GameViewController. So the way that we do this is I'm going to go ahead and all of these are going to be directly going over to this GameViewController right here. So what we want to do is just create one function that makes that all easy. So I'm going to go ahead and say func move to game, open parentheses, close parentheses. Now inside of these parentheses, we're going to have one variable that gets passed over, and this is the certain game type that's going to be played. So I'm going to go ahead and create an enum up here so that we can work with certain game types. So we're going to go ahead and say enum, tab that all in. Then for our name here, we're going to go ahead and call this game type. And then for our cases here, you're just going to be naming certain cases that we're playing. So in this case, I'm going to say easy. Then we have case medium. And then lastly, we have case hard. And then finally, we have case. And you can't start off the name of a case with a letter, so we're just going to go ahead and call this player 2. And boom, we're all good to go there. Now with our func move to game right here, we're just going to say open parentheses, and then now we can go ahead and expect a certain game type. So I'm going to go ahead and say game, colon, and then we can put in our game type in there. Then say open curly bracket, close curly bracket. And then now that we have this, we can go ahead and call that easily. So I'm going to say move to game, and then we're going to go ahead and pass along a certain game type. So in this case, the certain game type will be dot player 2, and then you can just go ahead and add that. Then we're down here for our easy, we're going to say move to game dot easy, then go ahead and do that with the rest of them. So there you have it. Now we have that function move to game with a certain game type being called, and now we're going to go ahead and move to that game. So how do we do that? So the first thing we need to do is reference that game view controller from the storyboard there. And the way that we do that is we're going to say let my game VC equal, and I'm going to set this equal to self.storyboard dot, and then we're going to get instantiate view controller with identifier. Now we don't have an identifier set up properly with our game view controller, so let's do that. So down here inside of our identity inspector, we have identity storyboard ID. So with our storyboard ID here, I'm just going to go and call this my game VC, and we are good to go. Now let's go back over here to my menu VC, and now for our with identifier here, we can just go ahead and put in our game VC. And then now it doesn't really reference this as my game view controller yet, so I'm going to say as my game view controller. And then now finally we want to go ahead and move over to that game VC. Now the way that we move over to this view controller right here is we need to have a navigation controller. So let's go back over here to our project, and in this case we're going to go ahead and put in a navigation controller right here. It's going to add a table view, just go ahead and delete that root view controller right there. We want this navigation controller. So go ahead and take that navigation controller, right click from it over to our menu VC, and we want to go ahead and say root view controller. Now with this arrow that we have right here that put it as the initial view controller, we want to move that over here to our navigation controller. So now this navigation controller can control all the movement between certain scenes. Now one thing that this navigation controller automatically adds is this little top bar here. For a game, that's not really necessary, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So you go over here to your attributes inspector and say shows navigation bar, you're going to go ahead and take that off. And now you don't have that annoying thing there anymore. And we're just going to be able to push over to that view controller properly. So let's go back over here to our menu vc.swift. And now we can go ahead and move over to this game VC that we just referenced. So I'm going to go ahead and say self.navigationcontroller.push view controller. And we're going to go ahead and push the view controller, which will be our game VC. Animated, we're going to set this equal to true or not true, however you want it. So now this is going to push it over to that other thing, and we're now going to be able to pass along some certain variables as well. Now, the way that we do, so now that we have these variables being passed along, we need to go back over here to our GameViewController.swift and set up these variables accordingly. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make these public because I think that's going to work better in terms of, because we're referencing this from our GameScene.swift and our GameViewController, so I think that's going to work best. But what I'm going to do is say var current game type will be equal to, and then we're going to set this equal to a game type. So we're going to grab a certain game type and apply it to that current game type. Makes sense? And then just say open close parentheses like so. Now with this, we can go back over here to our menu VC, and when we move over to a game, we can go ahead and take that game type and apply it to that current game type. So I'm going to go ahead and say my current game type, but I need to go back over here to my game view controller, hit Command S to save it. Then we go back over here to our menu vc.swift, and now we can say current game type will be equal to that of my game. And we're good to go. So now that move to game, it's going to move over to that scene, and we have that current game type. Now you also need to work with some variables in order to get that current game type working properly. So we need to go back over here to our GameScene.swift, and where we start the game, this is inside of our did move to view. We start the game automatically here. Now when the game starts, this is when we want to apply the impulse. So we need to go ahead and figure out how to make all of this work when the game starts. So first off, we have ball.physics body to apply impulse. We're going to go ahead and copy that and just take that off of there like that. And boom. So now when this function start game is specifically called, then it's going to go ahead and do that. Now obviously our start game is just going to be in the did move to view right now, but if you want to add a button that starts the game, that's where you would add it. Now the thing that we need to worry about is with the update function right here. Now down here, if you can recall, we have update enemy.run, and then we have run ball.position.x with the duration of 1.0. So this is actually the level of difficulty that we apply to our person or our enemy. So the way that we determine the duration based on the current game type is we need a switch case. So I'm going to say switch current game type, then open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Then inside of here, we're going to go ahead and have a few cases. So in the case that the current game type is equal to dot easy, then colon, we're going to run this stuff in here. Then we need a break right after that. Then we're going to add another case. So we're going to say dot medium, colon, break. Then we also need hard, and then we also need 2-player. And in terms of our current game type, this is all that we can achieve. So we have easy, medium, hard, and player 2. So in the case that it's easy, we're going to go ahead and take this enemy.run, we're going to copy that, delete it, and then move it up here. So I'm going to go ahead and put the easy right here as, let's set the duration, because I think 1.0 is actually going to be our medium. I could be wrong. You can change this to whatever you want. But I'm going to change the duration here for our easy to be 1.3. Then we also take this, and I'm going to put this as 1.0 for medium. Then our hard, I'm going to go ahead and set this equal to 0.7, which would be nearly impossible to beat. So it gets hard at that point. Then we have player 2, and then we just leave that blank. So there's no enemy.run going on there. And in this case, we wanted to go ahead and update according to the touches moved. So we need to go up here to our touches moved and our touches began up here and make things work in that sense. Woo! Made it past that point. So as you can see with our touches began and our touches moved, right now this is only working for one player. If my finger is at the top of the screen, it's also going to change the bottom player because that's just how it works. So what we need to do is determine whether or not the player 2 is touching the screen versus me touching the screen. So the way that we do this is we need an if statement. So we're going to go ahead and say if my current game type is equal to dot, and then this is going to be player 2, then we're going to go ahead and run this stuff in here. Now, in this case, we also want to test the location. So we're going to say if my location.y is greater than 0, then we're going to run this stuff in here. Else we're going to run the other player's stuff in here. Now, these are going to be running constantly, so this is not going to be an if-else statement. We also want it to be, we want this to be an if-if statement. So we're going to say if my location.y is greater than 0, and then we also want to have if my location.y is less than 0. Again, 0 is the center of the screen, so that's what we're working with. So I'm going to say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and in this case we want to go ahead and say main.run if it's less than 0, and then we're going to get enemy.run if it's greater than 0. So this should work like so. And then we have the duration, same for both of them, so we're good to go there. For the location.y is greater than 0, of course this is going to be changing our enemy.position, so I'm going to say enemy.run, and then it's going to change that enemy position. So this is inside of our touches moved right now. So if our location.y is greater than 0, then the second person is going to be moving the enemy. Whereas if you're touching it on the bottom half of the screen, then you're going to be touching the main. And I think that works pretty good. Now also down here, we want to have an else statement right outside of this if statement, so that if it's any other game type, then we're just going to run this normally, that it's just the main person changing the scene. And that should work. Now let's go ahead and take all of this and copy and paste that up here to our touches began. And that should work absolutely perfect. So now let's go ahead and build and run this, and let's see where we're at. And actually it was giving me this error because I put open close parentheses, and it's not an initializer, so we don't put that. So what we're going to do is just automatically set that equal to a medium, but obviously this is going to get changed when we press one of those buttons. So let's go ahead and build and run this, and we should be good to go. Alright, so here we are on our iPad. Obviously I didn't set up constraints properly with the menu view controller, but that's something you can set up on your own time. Let's go back over here, and I'm just going to press easy, and when we start the game it should launch the ball and everything works perfectly, but obviously something's not right with it launching the ball, so let's go ahead and fix that. So the reason it wasn't working is because we call start game before we initialize any of this stuff. So we want to go ahead and take this start game and just put it at the bottom of here so that we can grab all of our top labels from off the screen, get our ball and everything, then we can apply this stuff in here. So let's go ahead and build and run this, and now it should be working. Alright, so here we are. Let's go ahead and press easy, and boom, it initializes everything, and there's our easy player. That is a little bit too easy, I gotta say, but you can of course change that to whatever you want. Now let's go ahead and work with our other ones. We don't have a back arrow yet, but it's something that you can very easily add, and if you want me to cover how to do that in the next tutorial, this tutorial's gone on long enough, then I'll show you how to do it in the next one, but it's very easy to implement yourself. Just let me know. So here we are, I'm going to press 2 player now, and now this ball is going to launch, and I can move this person and this person, and this should all be working simultaneously. Let me actually run this on my iPhone just to make sure. Alright, so here we have it on our iPhone, and now I'm going to click 2 player, and now as you can see I can move both of them around simultaneously, and also it looks a lot smoother than on my simulator, I will say that. Looks pretty good. So now you guys can play each other to your heart's content, as well as you have an easy and other mode. Now also one other thing you can do is you can cheat on your friend. So if your friend's touching up here while you're moving the game, you can of course touch it and it automatically moves that. So I mean, it's a feature, I guess. But anyway, there you have it. This should be the final installment of Pong. If you guys have any further questions, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I might make a video on it to continue on this Pong series. We'll see. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.